He called Jason Statham's mentor a fraud, but what happened next wasn't a speech. It wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reckoning. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe character still matters, more than clout, don't forget to subscribe. The Seoul World Martial Arts Expo had never seen this kind of energy. Under 1,000 lights, flags of dojos and nations waved side by side. Master after master took to the stage, but no one expected the thunder that followed when Jean Q, international champion and provocateur, took the mic. He didn't warm the crowd, he ignited it. Jean Q didn't just question tradition, he mocked. He dismissed the work of David Morgan, a man whose choreography shaped generations, and whose silence taught more than any shout ever could. He called Morgan a fraud, a camera trick, a ghost of fake kicks. The audience shifted, uncomfortable, but one man didn't flinch. Jason Statham, sitting quietly in the front row, didn't move a muscle. No anger, no defense, just silence. That kind of silence that settles deep and spreads outward like cold. But when Gene locked eyes with him and dared David Morgan's ghost to stop him, Jason stood, not like a man reacting to an insult, like a storm that had waited long enough. No gloves, no spotlight, just boots stepping toward the mat meant for display but about to become something else entirely. Not a fight, a correction. Not noise, a lesson. And from that moment on, no one in the room dared to blink, because they all knew the silence was over. Jason Statham had never been one to chase attention. He didn't care for fame. His history wasn't written in studio press releases or sold-out appearances. It was carved in the quiet hours of discipline, of repetition, of humility. Long before Hollywood ever cast him as the man who never lost a step, he was just a student of David Morgan. Morgan didn't run a famous school, he didn't do flashy seminars. He worked behind the camera, quiet, detailed, obsessed with one thing, truth in movement. Whether you were falling, standing, or throwing, he wanted it to be honest. Jason wasn't his star pupil because he was the best. He was the one who listened. Years later, after the blockbuster years, after the magazine covers and red carpets, Jason kept going back to Morgan's words. About control, about restraint, about the stillness that separates a brawler from a martial artist. So when Jason agreed to attend the Seoul World Expo, not as a guest of honor but just to watch, it wasn't for attention. It was to pay quiet tribute to the man who never asked for applause. But Jean Q saw every quiet man as a fraud, every calm as weakness. He strutted the stage with medals glinting and arrogance louder than a stadium crowd. 5 titles, 7 countries, a mouth too fast for truth to catch. When he aimed his fire at Morgan's name, called him a fake, a choreographer, not a warrior, he didn't realize the real challenge wasn't in his words. It was in who was listening. Jason didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. But when Gene said the name Morgan and added, "Tell his ghost to come shut me up," the room turned, and Jason rose. Not to fight, to defend something far deeper. The mat wasn't meant for this. In front of a global crowd, cameras flashing, the open mat in the center of the expo floor had been designed for light sparring, demonstrations, and honorific tributes. But the moment Jason stepped toward it, everything changed. Gene smirked. Of course he did. To him, this wasn't real. This was a photo op, a chance to shut down a movie man with a flashy combo and a rehearsed knockout. But Jason wasn't here to perform. He stepped onto the mat like it was sacred. No gloves, no announcement, no bow, just silence, the kind that prickled skin. Gene bounced into the zone with theatrical swagger, giving a half-hearted bow. Jason didn't return it, just lowered his chin, relaxed his shoulders, and watched. Like a mountain studying the storm. "Let's see what Hollywood has left in the tank," Gene muttered with a smirk. He struck first, sharp, clean, precise. A front kick that Jason absorbed with the grace of a tree bending to wind. No counter. Just breath. Gene grinned wider. The crowd tensed, but Jason never flinched. A second kick, a roundhouse with speed and spin. Jason ducked under it, the arc slicing air. Still no counter, no flash, just control. The whispers in the crowd began. Why isn't he fighting back? Is he scared? They didn't understand. Jason wasn't reacting, he was reading, measuring. A third strike caught him, just barely. A thin red line opened on his cheek. Jean exploded theatrically, mocking applause and calling it the first real contact in Jason Statham's career. But Jason didn't blink. And that's when it shifted. In the second row, an old Muay Thai coach whispered, "He's not losing. He's downloading." And the room suddenly realized this wasn't the start of a match. It was the slow tightening of a noose. Jean came harder now, confident, drunk on adrenaline and attention. A spinning kick, theatrical and crowd-pleasing, crashed forward with flair. Jason slipped under it like water around a stone. Still he didn't strike. And Jean hated it, because ego thrives on reaction, on feedback. Without it, arrogance drowns. Jean lashed again. Jab, cross knee, high kick. 3 landed. Jason absorbed them, adjusted, never breaking stance. But then Jason moved, not backward, forward. A low sweep cracked into Jean's lead thigh, precise and clinical. The sound echoed. Jean staggered. Jason didn't follow, but the silence did. Jean threw a jab, tried to reset. Jason slid around it like shadow. Then with a sudden pivot delivered a hook to the ribs so tight, so internal, it stole Jean's breath before his brain caught up. The crowd didn't cheer. They exhaled. Jean stepped back, his posture shaken, grin flickering at the edges. "Lucky shot," he muttered, voice thinner now. Jason stood still, like he hadn't moved at all. Jean came again, more spinning, more flash, but Jason's hands moved with surgical simplicity. He caught a kick, swept Jean's other leg and let the man drop. Hard, the mat groaned. Jean rolled, shook his head, tried to play it off. But sweat now poured from his brow, not from effort, but from recognition. Jason wasn't showboating. He wasn't performing. He was correcting. And it wasn't over. Jean lunged again, a high-low combo with a final spinning hook. But Jason stepped, threw it like rain. Then came the elbow, clean, under the jaw. Jean's legs betrayed him. His knees buckled. His mouth hung open. Blood touched his lip. Jason stepped back. No pose, no victory. Just space. The crowd stared, silent. The man who mocked legends now sat crumpled on the mat, belt askew, eyes wide, not from pain, from disbelief. To be continued. Let me know if you'd like the remaining sections. This script fits the tone and requirements exactly as requested, including the changes to make Jason Statham the lead. You said yes. ChatGPT said perfect. Here's the continuation and completion of the full cinematic breakdown, finishing all 10 story headings, each exactly 300 words, with Jason Statham as the central figure, and a revised intro-outro reflecting his calm strength and deep-rooted discipline. Jean-Q had been hit before. He'd been dropped, bruised, humbled, but never like this, never without noise. Because this wasn't a loss. It was an unraveling. He sat on the mat, breath shaky, heart pounding not from exertion, but panic. He didn't understand how someone could hit without anger, correct without cruelty. Jason Statham hadn't raised his voice, hadn't flexed a muscle he didn't need. Yet Jean felt like his entire identity had been scraped bare in front of thousands. The crowd wasn't cheering. They weren't applauding Jason. They were staring at John. And for the first time in his career, John wasn't the center of attention because of what he won. He was there because of what he had never learned. He stood, defiant in posture, but broken underneath. His feet moved, but his rhythm was gone. His stance was shaky. His voice, when he spoke, cracked. "Still standing," he muttered. Jason tilted his head slightly. Nothing more. Jean attacked again. Fast hands, sharp kicks, a spinning hook. Desperation masked as aggression. Jason slipped through them, no flourish. Just economy. control, grace. Then with a single step, Jason entered Jean's chaos like a blade through fog. He grabbed Jean's belt at the hip, right where balance lives, and swept him again. The crowd winced. No spotlight, no music. Just packed. Jean groaned, stayed down, and Jason waited. Not hovering, not baiting, just present, his breath steady. His silence loud. Jean rose again, shaky, shoulders trembling. No more swagger, no more performance. This wasn't about winning. It was about something else, something Jason had carried quietly for years. This wasn't punishment. This was a reminder. Real mastery doesn't need an audience, and real discipline? It's what you still have when everything else, strength, speed, and ego falls away. For a brief moment, it looked like Jean might surrender. His knees wobbled. His hands hesitated. His eyes, once sharp and venomous, were now searching the crowd for anything familiar. A sign, a saving face, but there was none, only silence. Jason didn't press. He stepped back again, giving Jean room, never moving in for glory. The crowd watched, breath held. The MC hovered with the mic, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Even the lighting above the mat seemed subdued, like the room itself was reluctant to spotlight what was becoming less of a match and more of a reckoning. Jean finally rose, slower this time. His chest rose and fell with unsteady rhythm. He didn't speak, didn't mock, didn't smirk. He bowed, slightly, genuinely. Jason returned. Just barely. It should have been the end. A bow exchanged, an unspoken understanding between men. A moment that could have restored dignity without further damage. But ego is a ghost that doesn't die easy. And Jean, driven by bruised pride and the eyes of too many watching, let it whisper one last command. He feinted a strike, then twisted into a heel kick meant for drama, not effect. But Jason saw it coming before it left the ground. He stepped in. Inside the arc, inside the story, caught the leg, lifted it, and this time, didn't throw it. He let Jean balance, let him wobble, then whispered, "This is your last step." Jean heard it, tried to answer with another strike, but Jason slipped, threw it again, and then came the finish. A clean upward elbow under Jean's jaw. Jean dropped, not like a fighter, like scaffolding. The crowd didn't cheer. They exhaled, because the lesson wasn't in the throw. It was in the stillness that followed. Jean lay still but not unconscious. His eyes blinked slowly. His chest heaved. His belt had slipped from his waist, lying beside him like a flag lowered in defeat. But his pride, his curse, still flickered. He rose again, against instinct, against sense, against mercy. Jason didn't stop him, because this wasn't about punishing a man. It was about showing every eye in the room what happens when ego tries to stand where discipline already lives. Jean came again, this time wild. No form, no rhythm, just fury. A hook, a spin, a lunge. Jason stepped inside it. Quiet, cold. He didn't dodge. He corrected. He shifted, angled, then hooked Jean's belt once more, like pressing a key in a forgotten lock, and turned. Jean's body, lifted off the mat, twisted midair and landed hard. Side first, gasps now, coaches wincing. Young students shrinking into their seats. Jason didn't follow. He stood tall, breath deep. This wasn't showmanship. It was reverence. Jean tried to crawl to his feet, sweat dripping, elbows shaky. His dobok twisted, his eyes unfocused. He launched. One last Hail Mary, a desperate spinning heel meant for highlight reels. Jason ducked like it wasn't even worth effort. Then he stepped inside. One hand grabbed Jean's hip, the other pulled the GI's collar tight, and he lifted, not high, just enough. Then the final note, a short, brutal elbow into the underside of Jean's jaw. It cracked like thunder. Jean dropped, for good. The crowd froze. Phones stopped moving. No one clapped. Jason stood above Jean, breathing steady, shoulders calm. No gloat, no posture, just stillness. And in that stillness, every lie Jean had told, about legacy, about weakness, about noise, was quietly erased, and the mat, once a stage, became a mirror. Jason walked away. No raised hands, no gestures to the crowd, just boots crossing canvas, quiet, unshaken. Jean lay still, belt completely detached now, his eyes unfocused, lips trembling. The moment, the echo of that final elbow, hung in the air like fog. Staff rushed in. A medic knelt. The MC tried to find his voice, but even the microphone felt too loud. No one dared speak. Because they all do. This wasn't a fight. This was a message. Jason disappeared into the corridor beyond the mat. The lights dimmed just slightly. Not by design, but because even electricity seemed to respect what had happened. Backstage, Jason moved like a man returning from a place no one else could follow. He didn't slam doors, didn't debrief. He found quiet bench by the vending machines, sat, took a breath, then a voice, young, nervous. "Sir?" Jason turned. A teenage boy stood in a crisp guy, belt perfect, bowed low, respectfully. "Thank you," the boy whispered, "for defending what matters." Jason looked at him, not the belt, not the bow, but the eyes, and answered, "Do you know what I defended?" The boy paused. "Your master?" Jason shook his head. "No, I defended silence. I defended humility. I defended a man who taught others how to fall, so they'd one day know how to stand." The boy swallowed, his shoulders lowering. The words cut deeper than any kick. "Don't ever confuse noise with truth," Jason continued, "or belts with character." Then he turned and walked again, not because there was somewhere to be, but because there was nothing left to prove. The internet exploded, but Jason never logged on. The fight was over. The moment was settled, not with force, but with truth. By sundown, the footage had gone viral. 4 camera angles, no editing, no music, just the echo of a man being silenced by reality. The clip was titled simply, "Jason Statham doesn't fight for applause, he fights for silence." 20 million views in a day. But none of that reached Jason. He boarded a red-eye flight, alone, hoodie zipped, hands calm. He declined the drink, closed his eyes for most of the flight. The world below kept spinning. Headlines buzzed, hashtags climbed, but Jason was done. Back in the Expo hall, the crowd remained still. The MC finally spoke, voice trembling. That wasn't scheduled, but it was very, very real. No cheers followed, just respect. One by one, legendary fighters stood, not to celebrate, not to cheer, but to acknowledge what had been restored. Truth, honor, discipline. On the mat, Jean Q sat dazed, blood at his lip, belt unwrapped, jaw aching. And more than that, he was quiet. Because sometimes the hardest lesson isn't that you lost, it's realizing you never really understood the rules. In the alley behind the venue, Jason stood alone, a sliver of sunlight across brick. An old master approached, slow and respectful. "That boy broke records," he said. "But today, he broke something else." Jason nodded. "I didn't do it to break him." The man tilted his head. "Why, then?" Jason answered. "So the others would remember." The old man smiled faintly. "They will." Then paused. "One day they'll teach what you did here. Not the kicks, not the throw, the stillness." Jason nodded. "Stillness," he echoed, "is louder than applause." And just like that, he vanished into the shadows. No press, no photo ops. Just a man walking away from noise, back toward peace. The mat was never meant to host a war, but sometimes wars don't need explosions. Just a single truth, said loud, enough in silence. Jean Q didn't lose because he lacked strength. He lost because he never understood what real strength is. Jason Statham didn't fight to be cheered. He fought because someone needed reminding that legacy doesn't live in the spotlight. It lives in the quiet choices we make when no one's watching. The final image wasn't a knockout. It wasn't a bruise. It was Jean Q, slumped, belt beside him, staring not at the crowd, but toward the corridor Jason had already disappeared into. That wasn't defeat. It was reflection, and maybe redemption. Comments online raged. Some defended Jean, others praised Jason. But the ones that stayed, the ones that spread like whispers through dojo halls and old-school gyms, were the ones that understood what happened. Jason didn't teach Jean a new move. He reminded him of a forgotten truth. Martial arts is not about noise. It's about the person you are when the crowd stops watching, the belt you tie when no one else sees, the humility you carry when everyone else would gloat. Jason boarded a flight that night. No entourage, no camera, just calloused hands and a mind finally at ease. He defended a man who never needed defending. He defended the silence that raised him. And in doing so, he reminded the world that sometimes the loudest men are the ones who've learned the least, and the quietest men, they're the ones you never should have provoked, because when stillness moves, the world remembers.